Well, good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, I guess, depending on where you are. And thank you for joining us today on this webinar. Today we're going to be talking about branding and really how to differentiate your company. But first, my name is Brian Miller. I'm the Managing Director of Business Development here for PCI. And I want to welcome all of you and thank you again for joining us today on this is kind of a members-only webinar series where we're focusing on different, in this case, marketing-related type of topics for you. This is being recorded today, so what I'd like to do is hold all the questions to the end. You can type them in on your computer screen, and when we get to the end of the webinar here, it shouldn't take less than an hour here, we'll get through and address whatever questions we can, and of course, afterwards, you'll have my email and phone number, and more than welcome to follow up with me afterwards. So today, like I said, we're going to talk a little bit about branding and market strategy, too, as it relates to branding. We'll define what a brand is. We'll take a look at some related terms and some of the concepts out there. In this context, we're going to talk a bit about positioning and market strategy, because as you probably know, everything really integrates and relates together. I want to highlight some ideas and suggestions on how you can build your brand, your company brand, and then even end up with a little bit about PCI's brand, and of course, what that really means to you and how you can leverage that brand. So branding, it should be a part of your business strategy. It's bigger and more important, I think, than a lot of folks and companies sometimes connect with. It's the difference between making, well, let's say a lot of money sometimes and maybe just getting by, or in some business cases, the difference between success or failure. As you're looking at the screen now, I'd say you should be familiar with what this building is. This is the Apple building. It's the new headquarters under construction, and good for us in our industry. This is a total precast structure. It's precast structural systems, even with exposed precast concrete as well. And this is actually a great testament for precast. It's a great testament to what marketing and sales, when working together and complementing each other, can really accomplish. It's also great for precast in the sense that Apple and Apple's brand, if you would, actually carry a positive message here because they've decided to use precast concrete. And so we'll revisit that as we go forward. So let's start with the million-dollar question of the day, basically. You know, what is a brand? How do we define that? Well, as you go through and you talk to a lot of folks, some things we hear are, well, you know, is a brand a logo, basically? We see that, we associate that. Maybe it's you know, a slogan, some sort of tagline that's used. Could it be your reputation out there in your market and in the industry? Maybe it's your philosophy, the way that you're doing business, or maybe it's just elements, things like your website, for example, or even your culture. Are these your brand? Well, sometimes it's easier to say what's not your brand, and in essence, no. These are not actually your brand. You need to think a little bit bigger than that. A brand is much bigger than these. All these things we just mentioned, though, are clearly elements of the brand and very important to your brand, but not quite your brand. Let's take a look a little bit closer at a couple of them just real quick. The idea of a logo, very common. We all identify with logos and stuff. And you say, well, what is a logo then? Well, a logo is considered to be, like it says here, a design element, essentially. It's obviously a visual representation of the brand message. And it's important to have a logo that actually reflects your brand, because all these things do tie together. So it visually has to connect with the core message behind your brand and represent it from a visual perspective. And as I'm sure we're all aware, logos can be very powerful in bringing up brand identity and connecting to them. Kind of likewise, another one we talked about just a second ago as well, how about a slogan or a jingle or things like that in a campaign? Could that be your brand as well? And I said, no, that's, again, it's a brand element. It's a component of that. If you think about Coca-Cola, for example, again, very well recognized, very powerful brand out there, started back in the late 1800s. They have gone through a long series of what we could say are slogans or taglines. Actually, they've had more than 80 of these in the past, 130 years or so. And so those can change. However, their brand has not changed within that 130-year period. And that's important to stress. Brands really don't change with time. It's just sometimes how we communicate and the various components of it that will change and adjust with times. Now, to kind of identify with what a brand is, we can get a little bit more personal here. We're all individuals, we're all humans, so just think about yourself for a few minutes. Think back to your earliest memories of a brand. Let's take, for example, McDonald's, very popular. When you were younger, and maybe still today, what does that mean to you? When family said, hey, we're going to McDonald's for lunch or for dinner, what does that mean to you? There was an expectation. There was something we identified with, even at an early age, that helped us kind of connect with an expectation for McDonald's or any of these, whether we're playing with Legos or drinking Coca-Cola, etc. Now, today, since I'm assuming all of us are adults on the phone, you start thinking about some other brands that we come in contact with and use today, and think about why we make the decisions we make. Just as individuals, why do we fly a certain airline or drive a certain car? What drives those decisions? What are we willing to pay more for? Let's take a little bit closer look at some of these. So Southwest Airlines, today one of the most successful and profitable airlines, well, period. What comes to mind when you think of Southwest Airlines? Would you say that something like friendly service? Do a pretty good job of that. They're fairly efficient as an airline. That's one of the things they do to keep costs down, right? They're pretty much an on-time, and personally I do fly Southwest Airlines quite a bit, and I can share with you that these ring pretty true throughout my experiences with them. And they're fairly low price. They're usually considered a very affordable type of airline, correct? How about if we go over to one of my other favorite areas, the automobile world? We think of something like BMW, right? Why would you pay more for this car? I mean, if you think about a car, they all get us from point A to point B, right? I mean, what's the difference between this and, say, a Chevy Cruze? What are the things that come to mind about this? Again, you might think of things like, well, German engineering, which in itself is quite interesting that German engineering represents something in our minds. But you also think probably maybe quality, the fit, the finish. You could look at the price. They're known to be somewhat expensive relatively to other brands here in the United States, right? It's a premium type of automobile. When I think about performance, they're known sort of for performance, aren't they? They're fast, they're powerful, but they perform in a different way, essentially. How about the third one? How about Disney? What do you think of when you think of Disney? Better yet, when you decide to go see a movie and you know it's a Disney movie, what thoughts come to your mind? What are you thinking of, concerned about, or not concerned about? Or maybe if you're going to one of the Disney parks, what are the kind of things that you expect the minute you see that name out there? Would you think of fun? Would you think that they would be safe? The movie's safe for my kids to see, or the park's going to be safe, or an experience we're going to have there is going to be a fun experience? Is it going to be family friendly? These are all sort of the things that start to come to mind, and I'm sure you can come up with a few others. So what's behind the whole thing? You go back to the question, what does this mean? What is a brand then? Well, in the simplistic way of saying it, a brand is a promise. It's a promise between a company and its customer. And it's important that it's a promise of a core value. Okay, that means it's something that matters to the customer or the target market, target audience that we're working with. Now, these things are very important. It's what customers expect from every interaction with your company, and that is a very critical part of brand strategy. Think back to Southwest for a minute. They're known for very friendly service, right? What would happen if you called up Southwest, you got a person on the phone, and the person on the phone was quite rude, not very happy, not very pleasant? It would kind of create a bit of a conflict from what you would expect from Southwest in your mind. And so we'd have a breakdown of what their brand promise is to us. Now, brands, they create sort of this emotional link between you and your customer. And again, that's a very powerful thing. One way to look at it is we say, well, people buy products, but they have relationships with brands. So brands and branding, the art of dealing with all this, goes much further beyond than just a simple product itself. We're getting into something that tugs at heartstrings in some cases, but connects emotionally with customers. So now if we go back and look at these again, we think about Southwest and all those things that we talked about. Ultimately, their brand promise to us is to be friendly, affordable air travel. How about BMW? Well, BMW here, right, the ultimate driving machine, really says it's about performance and a driving experience. You notice their tagline actually ties in with that. And again, you could think for just a minute, I like cars personally, you say, well, let's compare BMW from a Toyota. Again, both cars get us from A to B, right? So BMW has a pretty much a good or great fit and finish. Um, we know they're a little more expensive. The cost of ownership is typically going to be higher to own a BMW. And things related to the BMW, there's a lot of technology going into them and some of the other high-end premium brands today, which can be very expensive to fix. They can be in the shop more often, things along those lines. However, if you flip over to the other side and you look at a Toyota, Toyota might not look as cool, might not be as fun to drive, handle as well, might not carry even in some perspectives the same level of prestige. But Toyotas are known to be fairly well built and have less time in the repair shops and ultimately a lower total cost of ownership. So we've just started discussing here are what differentiates these two different brands of automobiles and what some people are willing to pay for, what's of interest to some people. Is it more about the look, the performance, the styling of the car, or is it more about how much the car is going to be in the shop and what's the total cost of ownership going to be? And of course, third, if you look at Disney, kind of a straightforward one, of course, we're looking at quality family entertainment. And it's important to understand that every interaction with these companies, and we'll talk about this a couple times, needs to reflect this brand promise. Otherwise, there can be kind of a breakdown, and that can actually degrade from what a brand, the power of a brand. So now you say, well, why is a brand important, really? Well, we can get right down to the basics here. In essence, if you don't have a brand, then you're pretty much lumped into a commodity, which is very similar products, really no differentiation, which ultimately ends in low price and leaves not much else but low price on the table to make a purchase decision or an investment decision. Whereas with the power of branding and good brands that are unique and provide value, then we have a stronger value proposition, and ultimately we can charge higher prices. Just think back to what I said, it's the difference between buying a BMW 5 Series and a Toyota Camry. Why does one cost so much more, and why are people buying it? That starts to get into the differences between why you'd use branding. But there's more to it than that. Branding provides, in essence, a means of identifying your products from those of the competition in general. I mean, think about it if you just go into the store. You think of the colors of things maybe you're in the grocery store, the colors, the packaging, the graphics, all these things that are used to identify. Again, those are all brand elements used to identify what this particular product, service, or good happens to be. And that differentiation is also a key point because we need to tell our customer what is different between us or our product and the competitors. If they're both the same, with all things being equal again, all that's left is the difference in price, and that's typically not where we want to be. So think about this now in construction for a minute. If we look at a building, well, it's pretty much just a building, right? And especially to most people on the street, it's just going to be a building until we make a connection that that happens to be a precast concrete building. And furthermore, as you as a producer and company says, wait a minute, it's not just any precast concrete building, it's our precast concrete building. So branding helps us distinguish one product from another and buy a product that has a different value proposition than, let's say, a competing product, essentially. And by the way, with products, we are talking about things like it could be a physical good, a service, idea, etc. We sometimes use product in that generic sense to cover all those things that might be applicable out there. Now, your brand also helps customers make choices, right? When you add up the things we just talked about by sharing knowledge and familiarity with the attributes of your business and your product and stuff, we help customers better understand what they're getting. We help set expectations about the products so that they can align and hopefully align with what matters to those particular customers. Now, branding is most important where products and services essentially lack differentiation. Yes, makes perfect sense, right? Otherwise, like I said, we're pretty much in a commodity, and the only thing we have left on the table is price. So we'll go back to that more in a minute. Now, quite often, the examples I use might be in what we would call the B2C, the business to consumer world, because again, we're all individuals, we're all consumers, and we can all relate to this at least at that level. But the question comes up is how important is branding in the B2B or business-to-business world? Well, like I said before, first, brand references a variety of products. It can also reference a company, though, and services and things like that in different levels. So if you think for a minute as a B2C, okay, business to consumer, you might recognize a brand like Crest toothpaste, which is the #1 selling brand of toothpaste in the United States, maybe even the world. But that's the product brand. You may not be as familiar with Procter & Gamble, which is the company that manufactures. Now, once you hear it, most people know of the company and maybe what their brand stands for. But in this world, in the consumer world, that product name is very important and actually drives more of the sales than the company name. However, if you think of something like Coca-Cola, now you're in a case where the product and the company are one of the same name. And for what they're accomplishing, it actually works out very well for them. However, people may not know that Sprite, for example, another product brand, or Dasani water, for example, are manufactured by the Coca-Cola company. And so, again, what ends up being more important? Is it the product or is it the company brand? Now, when you get into B2B and the service industries and things like that, company brands really start to make a big difference. So, I mean, for example, IBM. Okay, we all know what IBM is. Again, I may not know what the latest software or latest hardware or computer program that they put out there, but I know IBM. I know that's a strong brand, and something that really matters out there is the quality and what they stand for. So now we have a company brand that all of a sudden makes a big difference. So do they matter? Absolutely. In fact, research has shown that in business worlds, the strong brands outperform weak ones by as much as at least 20%. And that's a fairly significant dollar amount. And furthermore, that decision makers are willing to spend more money, willing to pay a premium, if you would, for well-thought, well-developed brands to benefit them. And of course, that's alignment of value drivers and so forth. And if you just think through this for a minute, a lot of those big purchase decisions, which we find usually in B2B, it makes a lot of sense. For example, if you went home tonight and decided to purchase some shampoo and you didn't like it, you bought the wrong bottle, you could either just throw it out if you really didn't like it, or when the bottle runs out, you just go out and purchase a new one. So it's not a really big deal. There's not a lot of risk, a lot of consequence with it. However, if you are purchasing maybe an enterprise system for your company or a brand new mixer, and you get the wrong component, wrong product, wrong system, that's something the company's made a major capital investment and are going to have to live with and the consequences with for some time. And it's kind of like a building, right? If we put up a building, that's in theory going to be around a long time and have a lot of consequences associated with it. So it changes the decision-making process and the importance of the companies and the brands they stand for that we deal with and the decisions we make. In fact, if you mess those up, you might be looking for a new job, period. So there are core components to a brand. First and foremost, a brand must be identifiable, okay? If the promise does not bring value to the customer, why would they buy it? So it's kind of like trying to think of just selling a really nice automobile to a blind man who doesn't drive. It's irrelevant. The person doesn't need it, doesn't want it necessarily, so they're mismatched, and we're wasting energy trying to do so. Or in some cases, I would say, selling beautiful architectural precast to an engineer. Well, I'm an engineer, so I can make these jokes. That can be a challenge. However, selling beautiful precast to an architect, well, a different set of challenges. There's an alignment there. That's something they're concerned about. So whatever our brand is, it must resonate with the customer, and it must bring value to them. And by the way, who defines value, or who defines a value proposition? This is a good question to ponder for a moment. And for those of you out there that are saying, well, our customer does, you're absolutely right. Value is something that only a customer can truly decide. I can tell you what's valuable to me. You can tell somebody else what's valuable to you, regardless to whatever, whether you're purchasing a car, a house, a mixer, or a building. And so the customer really decides what's valuable to them. And that's an important perspective to keep in mind as we're developing our strategies and our brand. Now, brands must also be defensible. If it's not real, if your brand isn't true, you can't deliver on it, then you don't have a brand. You have to be able to actually do and deliver on what it is that you're building your brand promise around. So in construction, if we went out there and said, well, a stick-built house is the best thing in the world. It can stand up to tornadoes and fires and high winds and all this other stuff. Would you buy it? I mean, would you buy that story? That's just not true. Now, people may buy houses, don't be wrong, but that brand promise isn't true. We all know that. The third thing is, and also very critical part of this, it has to differentiate you from your competition. You can think of cars again, like I said over and over, they all get us from one place to another, but they're not all the same. Some focus on luxury, some are sporty in performance and fast, some just look better, they're sleeker, they put more money into design and curves. Some have more features, new features that might be interested to a certain demographic or group of folks. Some are more reliable. Their whole focus is not being in the shop, they're using better quality parts and so forth. Where does your company fit into this whole picture? What are you providing and what are you focusing on? But these three things, being identifiable and actually mattering, if you would, to your customer, being defensible, meaning being real, something you're delivering on, and differentiating between you and your competition are core things in developing a brand promise. And this is important. We really can't be everything. We might want to be, we might try to be, but we can't be everything. We can't be everything to everybody. This is difficult to do. I mean, just fundamentally, if you think about what it takes to deliver on one brand promise, it's often going to be at odds with what it takes to deliver on a different or another brand promise. So to try and highlight this, we'll go back to the famous conundrum here between schedule and quality, and obviously we always talk about schedule, quality, and price, the three things we want to deliver to customers that they're in demand of us. So for example, just comparing schedule to quality, we shoot for both. I mean, just in general, we want to do both, we want to do well, but it's difficult to do both because at some point in time, something is going to happen that is going to put them at odds with each other, and we're going to have to make a decision on which one's more important. You're going to get that piece coming out of the form one day, and we're going to say, this doesn't quite work. So do we scrap the piece and recast it knowing that's going to mess up the schedule and be late? Or do we send the piece anyways? And I know I'm oversimplifying that, but the idea is still there. What did we sell the customer? Did we say, hey, we sold you quality, it's going to be right even if it's late? Or did we say, hey, it's going to be on time, but you know what, it may have some defects, it may not be perfect? Tough decisions, but what are we building around as our brand promise is kind of the idea. You can't be all things to all people. So ask yourself, what makes your company different than your competitors? Or another way of looking at this is, what is your unique value proposition as a precast producer or a supplier company? We all have competitors out there. These are important questions. They can make your head spin a little bit, but they're important questions. One thing that may come out is you can say, well, we sell precast concrete, and obviously you can brand products. We do it in the consumer market all the time. So why don't we just brand precast? And we're selling a different type of precast. Well, let's take a look for a minute. Not something impossible, but let's just take a look. If we pull out a few attributes, some big attributes related to construction. So speed, right? Accelerated construction, schedule is always a big deal. Looking maybe at site impact. Is it going to take up a lot of job site space and scaffolding and storage, or can we work on a tight site, etc. Maybe an aesthetical standpoint. Is it going to look great? How versatile is it? How energy efficient is it? These are some pretty big areas right now, and the related benefits of saving time and money and energy and so forth are pretty important, especially depending on which customer groups you look at. If you compare precast to cast in place and steel, these play out differently. Precast, obviously, we do really well in all four of these categories. When you look at cast in place, not so much. It's a slower building system. There's a lot of form work and curing time and so forth on site. And it's not real pretty. I mean, they can do things in forms, and we can get aesthetics out of there, but it's much more challenging and not nearly as versatile. But it can be energy efficient. I mean, you still have thermal mass. It is concrete. It can be designed and built with integrated insulation and applications and so forth. You look at steel and you say, well, steel's pretty fast. It can reduce site impact depending on how it's all put together. But aesthetically, can you do a metal cladding system or curtain wall? Maybe, but not quite as versatile as what we can do with precast. It's not very energy efficient. So from a product standpoint, you say, well, this is pretty good. Hey, Precast looks pretty good here, basically. However, these attributes and benefits are really relative to the precast concrete in general, aren't they? And so whether you're making precast or your competitor's making precast, we're talking about precast concrete. If it's all the same, then the question comes down to, well, how do you differentiate your company? Why should I pay you more money than the competitor over there? What are you bringing to the table that's unique and valuable to me that changes this? Otherwise, it's just all the same. And some companies have done this. It's not impossible. I mean, you can make proprietary product systems that offer certain advantages and features and sell them out there into marketplace, or we've had other companies develop unique components for systems such as reinforcement, etc. That's all fine. It's just more challenging. And at the heart of it, ultimately, we'd say, you know, PCI and regions, for example, working together are out there to differentiate and sell that message we just saw of precast, and really increase the demand for precast concrete relative to, you know, cast in place or steel or wood or glass or any other system out there. We want more people to use precast, and together, including all of our members here, we're working on that. But the thing you, as a producer, have to really look at is, how do you differentiate your company? Why should they use your precast over somebody else's precast? So again, you kind of go back and you say, what makes your company different than your competitors? You know, how are you going to brand your company? Well, let's look at this. One step kind of towards figuring this out is dealing with where you're positioning your company and how that all relates to your market and your market strategy and your business strategy. So differentiation, it doesn't happen by accident. Sometimes I guess it can be forced on you, but it really doesn't happen by accident. The question is, how are you differentiating yourself? And this ties into your positioning and ultimately your business and market strategies. And sometimes we refer to this as, what's your seat on the bus? Okay, the bus is your market, and as you can see, it's already overcrowded with competitors and people in there, but only one person can sit in one seat, really. So what's your seat? Why are you picking that seat, etc., kind of thing? Well, let's start with a real basic understanding of your business and the current environment you're in. Now, many of you probably already have this. Maybe it's something you want to look at updating, or maybe it's something you want to explore more. But taking a look at, you know, where are you at? Your customers, your markets, your competitors. In other words, really understanding the environment you're in today and determining where you want to go. So part of this, of course, is an environmental analysis. I'm sure most of you are familiar with a SWOT type of analysis. It's going to help you identify the strengths and weaknesses in your company, in your organization. So for example, applying this to the full strategy, if you're really good at engineering as a company, you're very technical, are you taking advantage of that? Or how are you taking advantage of that? How are you communicating that? And are you targeting the jobs that really align very well with that? If you're very good at manufacturing efficiency, how are you taking advantage of that? Of course, a SWOT analysis also takes a look at threats and opportunities going on in the market, in the business world. So what's happening with codes? What's happening with government regulations or things in your marketplace, in your community or your state? What's happening even from an economic standpoint, or even social and other influences that may have an impact, creating a threat or an opportunity in the future? All things you want to take into account. You also want to do a market analysis. Okay, somewhat similar, right? But your focus here is to really understand what the markets are and how they align with your strengths and your competitive advantage. You want to know how big a market is. You want to know who the competitors are in the market. You want to know if the market is growing or shrinking, what the future forecast looks like for that particular market. And really, is there something unique you can bring to the table to give you a competitive advantage in that particular market? Now, as part of this, you're going to take a look at your customer. That's a very critical part. Who's making the decisions there? How are they made? What's valuable to the customer? We call those value drivers. And depending on who we talk to, they're different. An architect's value drivers are different than an engineer's value drivers, which are very different than the value drivers for a developer or contractor. So it's important to take a look at that and understand what they're willing to pay for. And also, strangely enough, you want to keep in mind that as you really start to focus in on this, not every job is the right job for you, and not every customer is the right customer for you. And that sounds strange, but, and also a competitor analysis. Who are your competitors? What are their market positions? What's their market share? How big are they? Where are they going? What do you think the reactions might be if there's certain things that you do out there? So it's really important to do this analysis and get a good understanding of where you are so you can play to your company's inherent strengths, and ultimately you want to really develop a sustainable competitive advantage that people are willing to pay for. Now, if we start talking about market positioning here for a minute, which deals with market strategy, this is all about where am I going to put our seat on the bus for differentiation and develop our brand. Ask yourself, well, what's your company's position in market strategy? On one end of the spectrum, there's this cost leadership approach, which is a nice way of saying we're really planning on being very low priced. On the other end, there's a value creation strategy, which is focused on providing unique value to customers. So let's take a little bit closer look. If you're thinking you're more of a cost leadership strategy approach, okay, you're going to be a low-cost producer, right? That means that you're going to focus on really trying to keep your costs low. You're going to be pricing to be very competitive. So it's kind of like saying, I plan on being the low bidder on the project pretty much. We know that usually results in low prices, and you need higher volumes. If you're going to have lower prices, you're going to end up with higher volumes to kind of push things through, which means you're probably going to target broad markets and a broader audience to keep those volumes up higher, if you would. A lot of ways you can do this, of course, right? You have to be very good at manufacturing, so you're going to employ probably lean practices and looking at inherent advantages in your businesses. You probably have manufacturing expertise. Maybe you're utilizing economies of scale. Probably looking at vertical integration, either forward or backward, and looking at some long-term contracts for cost controls. Everything you can do to keep costs down, essentially, because you're looking at being Walmart, and there's quite a bit that stays focused on that part of the science, if you would. Now, keep in mind, no matter what market you're in, at the end of the day, there's only one that can actually be the low bidder, right? There's only one person that's going to be the best at this in a particular market. Now, some of the things you take a look at, like I said, a cost leadership strategy is usually very operationally focused, very good at manufacturing and process control, probably doing a lot of bid work because it takes a lot more time to get into negotiated work and design build and all the other value that comes with some of that costs more money, and therefore it doesn't help you reduce your price any. So that would go against that kind of a strategy. And you may be able to differentiate by some aspect of performance. I mean, there are quality levels out there. There's schedule again. Which one are you going to pick and kind of focus in on? But all these things deal with at one end of the spectrum. Now, if you go all the way to the other end and you say, okay, let's talk about a value creation strategy. That's where we want to position. We're going to provide a lot of value out there. Then you're going to take a look at products and services that offer those unique attributes. What about your company and product services are unique? What do you do that provides more value? And value meaning something that a customer is willing to pay for. You're probably going to segment more. You analyze your markets and segment your customers. There's a different value proposition for the architect, so the way you approach them is different than you approach the engineer. Probably a lot more front work, a lot more relationship building. Understanding what matters to them becomes a really big part of being able to align these values. But it pays off because ultimately you're talking about premium pricing relative to the previous strategy. And so this is a different approach. It takes different focus and different skills, though. Whether you're talking about now product development skills, probably a stronger sales force and marketing team, getting a reputation out there, but probably known for that innovation, that new product development and so forth, and looking at different jobs. Probably a lot more negotiated work along these lines, project conversions, design build, maybe you're offering design assist, etc. Making investments in things that maybe a low-cost provider probably would not make investments in. So, thinking about this, again, what is your company's positioning strategy? Is this something that you've talked about? Is it something that you have written down? Are you wherever you're at today? Are you there because you've wanted to be there? You know, you've developed a plan, you've done all this stuff. You said, this is our seat on the bus, this is what makes sense. Or are you just somewhere and maybe not 100% sure of how you got there? And another perspective is do you want to change your strategy after you start to think through this? Is it something that you want to do differently? Maybe doing an up-to-date analysis today might give you new insight on something like that. So this whole thing is about where do you fit in the market, and how do you align your value offerings, your value proposition with stuff that people are willing to pay for, your customers. I'll give you an example. It's a bit of a personal example to just kind of highlight it. In another lifetime, I had the pleasant opportunity of running a design-build construction company. And when we put the company together, and by the way, it did a lot of single-family residential, and it also did some light commercial work, we did a thorough market analysis and saw an opportunity. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of low-cost providers out there. Price beats everything else, and sure, we'll throw it up, and it might last a few years, kind of thing. What we discovered is there was a market that wasn't being served that really dealt around quality. There was this understanding out there, or this perception, I should say, that all contractors were liars, thieves, unreliable, and that people would really just like to sleep at night if they could get somebody to do something right and know they would do it right even if they didn't watch them do it. And furthermore, people that could be reliable and provide a level of service, be polite, show up on time, a variety of those things. And so we took a look at basically positioning our brand around the idea of that quality, that service, that reliability, and serving that market. Again, not everybody was our customer. There were people out there that would pay for this, that looked for it, and there were other people out there that just wanted the lowest price. And those are the folks that we didn't spend a lot of time with. So understanding that was important, because then everything we did around that had to reflect it. We became a design build company because we needed to spend more time with our customers. We could offer a greater value by doing the designs in-house for customers and kind of working through that process. We found that our satisfaction was much higher because we spent time building relationships with customers and so forth. So that was an example of the position we had selected, which actually worked out very well at that time. So you can position yourself at one end of the spectrum or the other, or actually anywhere in between. It's a broad area, and there's different ways to subtly start to differentiate yourself as you go through this. But the key thing here is if you really want to be getting away from the lowest cost, then it starts to become really dependent on your brand development. And that's the only thing that's going to truly move you away from kind of that low-cost perspective. So that brings us to kind of another term and concept to take a look at, and that's called brand equity. Okay, so we'll look at this and a few other terms here real quick and kind of get a feel for it. But brand equity is essentially, what is somebody willing to pay for your product just to have your brand? That's what we all like, right? So this is pretty important. First of all, think of it just personally for a minute. Again, I find that thinking of things personally, it helps me connect with a lot of these ideas. So what items do you personally buy that are brand names versus what items do you really not care about and you just buy on price or generics? Why do you make those decisions? And I'm sure what you feel is important to buy a brand with might be different than what your neighbor feels is important, or your boss, because we're different people and we have different value drivers and so forth. So brand equity is what we're trying to build. This gives us that differential and says, look, to buy my precast, you're willing to pay more money because we're providing something that the competition is not, and we're providing something that you feel is of value to you, and therefore you're willing to pay that difference out there. Another perspective on brand equity, if you were selling a company, those of you in the financial world know that there's a difference between what we actually pay for the company in terms of assets and things like that, and the additional money we pay for the intangibles. On a balance sheet, we call that goodwill, and in some companies that goodwill can represent 20-30% or higher of the actual value of the company. They're buying brand equity in most cases. They're buying those intangible things that have a value to it, but you just can't pick it up right off the table. So Coca-Cola, McDonald's, those ones we're looking at, all of those brand names have very high brand equity, and people are willing to pay for those. Another term you should be familiar with is brand strategy. Okay, this is in essence, it's based around your market position and takes a look at how you intend to attract and communicate, transact with, deliver your products, your service to your customers. So it includes everything, all the components of your communication, your marketing programs, your various pieces, all the way through the point of purchase and even post-purchase process and behaviors of your organization. How are you going to execute delivering your brand promise all the way through the process and interactions with your customers. That kind of sums it up as what is your brand strategy essentially. You already know your market positioning out there. How does this all relate? Now here's something that a lot of people sometimes have a difficult time with. Every single thing matters. This is very important. Everything you do in your company and day-to-day decisions will either support your brand or it will detract from your brand. There is no middle ground. If you think about all of the touch points you have with your customers, whether it be, and potential customers, you might not even know some of these folks, whether it be they see an ad from you, they're following you on social media, they see you at a distance, one of your trucks go by, they get a business card at a trade show, they read an article about your company or organization, maybe you're working with them, giving them samples, or they're talking to people, your salesmen and your experiences, they call you for a minute and deal with your phone system. Is it an automated system? Is it a person? Is it easy? Is it hard? You know, every interaction through of course, they're purchasing from you, they're building something, the delivery of products, what happens after the sale. All of those things either support or detract from your brand. You're either reinforcing your core promise or you're not. And like I said, that's kind of hard to sometimes wrestle with, but it's very true. I'll go back and give you a quick example from our company, again, the Design Build Construction Company. We had a discussion about the brochure, because yes, way back then you really did have printed brochures, and the type of paper we selected was a much more expensive heavyweight paper, because the customer, whether they say it or not, looks at that and says, oh, wait a minute, if they put zero time and quality into this, what are they going to put zero, quality into my house or our project? So everything we did had to focus around quality and service. So our brochure was a very nice, expensive brochure. Likewise, if you had a personal experience, most people have open houses or models and stuff like that in the residential world. It wasn't just, how you doing, good luck, walk through. They were guided tours. It was not uncommon to spend an hour or 2 hours with a customer, walk through, answer questions, explain things, very personalized attention, because that's the level of service that we were selling to get through the entire build process. And since for homeowners, it's one of the largest decisions and investments, if you would, that most people make, it's a very concerning one. People want it to be right. They really, really want to make that investment pay off. So having somebody there that reassures them and that level of service through that biggest purchase of your life is a very good thing. So just ways that we related all our various components to building around the brand. So your image matters. Like I said, all these touch points matters. If your brand is trying to convey, something like this, high-end luxury hotel, but this is what you're delivering and this becomes your reputation, you pretty much don't have any brand equity, and you're actually, in conflict with your brand. There's a disconnect, and you're going the opposite way, basically. So please keep in mind everything matters. Brands and branding have no value, again, where the brand promise is not a core value. Let's not sell cars to blind men, because it's just not going to align very well. The customer doesn't ring true, or the brand doesn't ring true with the customer. Again, that's the connection there. If there's no connection, it's not going to work very well. The brand is not defended. It's got to be true. We have to work on it at all times to make it a reality and actually deliver what we say we're going to deliver. And the brand is not managed, and that's kind of what we're just highlighting. Everything matters. So a brand is something that we create. It's also something that we have to manage on a regular basis. So how do you create a brand? Well, you can start, like we said before, with understanding your company and your business. It's always a good idea to kind of redo that in research and investigation, know where you are, your customers, your competitors, etc. Things change. So you really want to identify your strengths, opportunities, and weaknesses and see if everything's in alignment today. And of course, that starts with things like the SWOT and the environmental analysis, getting into the market analysis, looking at customers, market segments. Obviously, markets themselves change quite a bit, and so do customers, of course. Customers change quite a bit as well. Identify your strengths and weaknesses, your opportunities, and start to align all these things in a row. And that's the first step, is really understanding all that's going on and just charting out and seeing what makes sense for your company. There's no point in trying to become a brand that does not align with who you really are. Otherwise, you have to change your culture and who knows what else related to your business to actually get that to work. So you don't want to fight an uphill battle. You have a lot of things in place. You want to align those well and take something that you know you can deliver on. So how do you create a brand? Well, you have to know the core value of your product or service to the customer. Okay, that's obviously a pretty critical point, and that comes out through the customer research, and there's different ways you can do that. This is a point where using some of PCI's information can be very helpful. PCI Marketing Resource and Research has done a lot of customer research and analysis and market research, and that is available to all of you as members. So you can start by looking at that. Regions have also done research and work, and of course we're talking to people every day. So that helps you get a better understanding of what would be valuable to your customers. You can conduct surveys yourself and encourage as a company to talk to people that, well, you have salespeople, you have existing customers, you may have lost customers that can provide you valuable insight. You know, why did they make the decision they made? What else is behind it? And by the way, everybody loves to say price is the #1 issue, but when you dig deep enough, you will find that there are other motivators and drivers behind that. And again, all you have to do is just look personally. There's a threshold where we will no longer pay less because of some particular issue. You know, we won't, hey, I could save an awful lot of money by going out and driving a, I don't know, a Geo that they don't make anymore, or a Kia, I guess, or something, but probably won't do that. So there's a threshold for everybody, even in business and in construction and so forth, but trying to figure that out sometimes can be somewhat of a challenge. Whatever you do, don't guess. Remember, the customer defines value. So ask, gain a better understanding of your customer. Now, in terms of other sources out there for market data, you can take a look at third-party sources like McGraw-Hill or Global Insights, Dodge, Freedonia, of course PCI, again, as I mentioned, PCA and stuff. PCI probably is the most relevant for what we do in the precast industry. But they can give global perspective for forecasts, what markets are going to do well, what markets might not be doing so well, etc. Then determine your positioning and market strategy. This all ties in with your business strategy. Again, aligning this with your strengths, your culture, what you think your target customers' value drivers are. Decide where you're going to be. Okay, align everything up. Now, some examples, just some things to take a look at. You might decide, well, we're a technical organization. We're a technical company. For example, we have a lot of engineers on staff, and we're really good at solving complex challenges. Great. Then maybe you're aligning yourself with complex jobs, possibly larger jobs, possibly high-risk jobs that a lot of companies might want to walk away from. They don't have the expertise to solve those types of problems. That may be how you want to build out a brand promise and pick a position in the market. You may be really good at customer service. You might be very friendly, extremely responsive, very supportive. You might provide extras, maybe do things for people that they or provide services that they can't. Maybe that's appealing to smaller companies, smaller projects. That might be another position to take into the market. You might be a very innovative company where your company is developing new products. You actually have product development, and you're developing new products, looking at integrating other systems and materials because that's a concern of certain customer groups, such as architects, on some of these big projects. You're developing new finishes, maybe. This is kind of an area. I was a precaster a really long time ago now, and we were an architectural precaster, and this was kind of an area where we had positioned. We got known for doing things that other precasters didn't want to do at that time. Architectural finishes that were challenging and risky that they felt, well, I don't want to mess with that. I'd just rather sandblast the panel because that's pretty known and safe versus getting into all this multiple finishes and pigments and really detailed formwork and how are we going to make that work out efficient and so forth. And so our company, we like taking on those challenges, and we got known for that. And after a while, customers would call us because they thought, well, we've never seen this done in precast before, but you guys are pretty innovative, so would you like to give it a try kind of thing. And sometimes that paid off extremely well. People are willing to pay for that. And other times, like anything, it didn't work out so well. Some of those risks were, well, they were risks. So other ways could be like being all-inclusive. Some companies might provide more of an all-inclusive approach. Where you're doing everything from design work, you know, all the way through erection, maybe getting into the ceiling of the building or assigning a maintenance contract on a parking structure. Just different ideas and ways. Again, what are you providing as a company that's valuable, that provides a differentiation between the other companies and so forth. There are many others out there, and there are many markets too. Are you working in the transportation market? Are you building parking structures? Are you looking at segments of the buildings market and so forth? Do you want to change and go after different markets? That would come out in your market analysis. That would help identify, hey, wait, we're really good at this. It looks like we could align ourselves well with hospitals. They seem to really care about quality and facade systems right now, and flexibility maybe in some other areas. So when you get all this together, align your value proposition and strengths to your customers. Take a look at what you have. Most companies today would have a mission statement. You all have a culture and products. Do they all align very well? Make sure that all of you have that point of differentiation, but make sure all your touch points then align. So you're not starting from ground zero. If you did an analysis today to kind of understand where everything is at, where opportunities are at, and think through this way, you can develop a unique brand promise and proposition, value proposition, that works well, that starts to differentiate you even more in a particular marketplace and so forth. And all these things then that we've been talking about need to line up to reinforce that. Now, by the way, if you choose to do absolutely nothing, you're not creating your brand. Don't worry, you're being defined by your customer one way or another, maybe inconsistently, and that's kind of leaving a lot to chance, but that's just a reality. If we don't create and manage ourselves, somebody else will sort of take care of that for us. So whatever that may be, you sort of will end up with one. So now, just kind of take a look here at the PCI brand for a minute, and how does this work for us? We're a technical institute and a trade association, so how does this work for us? Well, the essential brand promise all focuses around the idea of the body of knowledge, or BOK if you would for short. So you say, well, wait a minute, first off, what does that mean? The body of knowledge is defined, or refers, if you would, as a collective knowledge of our entire industry that is relied upon to design and build with a specific material or system. Now remember, this is a general body of knowledge. Obviously for us it's precast, but it's from that body of knowledge that pretty much everything else gets derived from, whether it be a certification program or a building code. And you think, well, how do we funnel into these? And then you start to think, well, PCI has committees and members that sit on different codes like ACI, for example, and we go and attend the IBC hearings. And so all this data comes out of the Institute and the research and starts to filter its way in over time into all of these end results or products, whether it be a code or a program. You say, well, what's the actual brand promise itself? If you say externally, what is the brand promise? Then I would say the PCI supports the specifier to advance innovation in the design of building, bridge, and infrastructure projects through developing, maintaining, and disseminating the principal body of knowledge and certifying the capacity to manufacture and install precast pre-stressed concrete. Okay, the core phrase, PCI develops, maintains, and disseminates the body of knowledge for the precast concrete structures industry. That's it. That's what we use publicly. That's what we use to guide our decisions and try and focus on as our brand promise throughout all we do. Research has showed really that core promise matters a lot to the designers, the owners, the specifiers. That's what they associate with PCI. That's what they expect. That's the reason why PCI certification carries so much weight and is specified and accepted. As one designer had put it when we were doing our research a few years back, he said, PCI literally wrote the book. That's one of the reasons why I trust their certification. I mean, that just kind of sums it up. It's all connected together, and everything we do, or most things I should say we do, if you think about, we do research and development. Now we're a standards development organization. We develop and publish the technical manuals, the specifications, the guides, all the industry involvement, whether it be with ACI or code bodies, the certification program, on and on and on, supports that statement. We develop, maintain, and disseminate the body of knowledge for the precast concrete structures industry. And this brand is associated with all of you as members and certified plants. And that same integrity, that same knowledge, that same trust that is bestowed upon PCI is also passed on to you by being associated with. That's the power of the brand. I often like to share a story that when I was working for a different trade association many years ago, I went to a meeting of contractors, and we went around the table and introduced ourselves, and they said hi, and that was pretty much it. And then I joined PCI and went back to the same meeting a following year, same person. And I introduced myself and I said, you know, Brian Miller, Precast Pre-Stressed Concrete Institute. And they actually said, would you like to join us at the table? We have some questions for you. Same person, but by changing the brand I represented, all of a sudden I carried a different weight in that meeting and a different perception about what I would be bringing to the table. So it's a very powerful brand. And again, all of you are using that brand and have something there to work with. PCI uses this core phrase, like I said, on many different things. This is an example of it here on what we call a boilerplate. This is our About PCI piece, if you would, or a fragment of that piece. It goes on to get a little bit more detailed. But just showing you how we've integrated the body of knowledge into things. Other examples here could be in some of the certification brochure or some of the advertising that we do, you know, referencing the body of knowledge and the precast concrete structures industry. This is a little write-up that says, it's actually on the back of the certification brochure, but it's the foundation of certification is the body of knowledge. And again, it's that integration with that that gives it so much weight out there in the industry. Okay, so in summary, since we don't have forever, what I hope you take away from this presentation is that a brand really is a promise, and it's a promise of a core value. It's something that matters to the customers and is well aligned. And to have a good brand, then it must be something that is identifiable and connects with that particular audience that you're targeting, of course. It's something that's defensible, meaning you can actually deliver on it, and you've hopefully aligned everything to actually deliver on that promise and so forth. So it's true, it's real. It should differentiate your company. If your brand promise is easily duplicated by everybody else you're competing with, it's not much of a brand promise. You're going to be competing on price again. It's something that must be developed and managed ongoing. It's not something you just do once and then walk away from it. It's a constant thing. When you're making big decisions, you look back at your brand promise and say, is this decision going to move us and support our brand, or is it going to, you know, detract or go opposite of what our brand promise is? And please keep in mind that everything a company does either supports it or detracts from it, from the type of business cards you select to everything else. Every touch point sends a message with your customer pretty much. So with that, I have got a few minutes here, I think. My information, contact information is on screen for you, so if you have any questions, of course, you know how to reach me and are welcome to do so. And I will take a look and see if we have any questions that may have come in. I'm not really seeing any at this point in time, but if you do have questions, feel free to give me an email. Be happy to talk with you more about this more. This has been recorded, so it's going to become available in the next few weeks if you want to share it with other employees at your plant, friends and relatives. And I hope you've enjoyed the webinar. I really appreciate your time. Thank you all very much.